So in past interviews, you described like the whites being above language. However, is there like a distinct sound to the whites, the white leaders, and the Night King? Is there like a differentiation of sound or communication between them?
Well, basically how the Night King and the Wight Walkers themselves pretty much make no noise. I mean, how in my mind it's more, I mean, they have a freezing quality. Basically, like when I came on the show in season 3, there hadn't been a lot of Wight Walker action up until that point, and they were trying to figure out how to deal with it. They actually, David Peterson, who created Dothraki, he created Squath, which is the language of the Wight Walkers. So he actually created a whole language for them, but he tried it, and it just kind of fell flat. Not because the language he created wasn't great, because his languages are fabulous, but it just seemed weird somehow. And we tried it a bunch of different ways, and I had this idea, because it's the scene where Wight Walker's walking through the forest towards Samwell and Gilliar, and then Samwell kills Wight Walker at the end, right? So I was watching this and thinking, God, what could we do? And I thought, what if, like, as they walked, they just froze everything in their path? It's like Mr. Freezy walking through. And so that was the beginning of that kind of concept, where they spoke through this power and connection with nature, and that then I extended that when by the time you get to Hardhome, which is the big showdown, that you hear this insane announcement, which sounds like the earth is cracking in half. And it was my idea that was my expression of the idea that they actually could control the forces of nature. That they didn't. Why speak with language when you can control the forces of nature? I mean, who needs to do that, right? So that was kind of, and it gives them power, and it gives them this a weird, not a mythology, but it adds to a mystique to them, and something. Also, when they never speak, but they arrive with such doom and impending destruction, and you know it. How do you express that? And it was through these kind of crazy feeling of the earth cracking and weather and all that, and this ice is freezing. They're so cold, and it's funny because I was really happy that I went that route, because by the time Viserion meets his thing, his downfall, I could apply those things to him too, and it was a good thing to hold on to, because it was because I was looking for a sonic story, forces of nature, you know what I mean? Something I could use as their quote unquote voice, and it's worked well, I think. I mean, it has that. Something. I mean, it makes my skin crawl when they show up.
It does. It's definitely like when like a scene's happening, it's like impending doom almost. When like you hear it, you're just like, oh no.
Because you know they're powerful, but they say nothing, and it's like, oh.
It's even more terrifying.
It's kind of more terrifying, in that they just freeze. They just their movements. When you're up close to them, you hear their freezy bodies moving, and their head turns and stuff. I love that stuff. It just gives them something.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And
I was going to say, you asked about the whites too. So the whites,
like the different social ranks.
The whites make noise mostly when they attack. So they've got, and what's left of their voices in my mind was not much. There were holes in it. And I extended that idea when the polar bear shows up. You hear it in the polar bear, and you really hear it in Viserion as well. You'll hear this knocking sound. You hear it a little in some of the whites. You hear this knocking sound. So I used bones to clank together. But the idea that I had in my mind was that their vocal cords were frozen. So as soon as they tried to shriek, they just clacked together. And, do you know what I mean? So it's just, again, it's like coming up with ways. It's like, how can they speak without speaking? What are the sonic ideas? And when the whites in 3, God, they all blend now. When they first meet the children of the forest, and before they enter the go to see the Three-Eyed Raven, that sequence where the Wights first, they're all popping up out of the ground. So that screaming, you'll hear it, and I literally was tearing holes in the sound. Because look at their bodies. It's like most of it's gone, but just a little bit left. So I was trying to find the sonic equivalent of that. Played around with those ideas. And then the Syrian, the blowing of the fire and the screeching. And so that story, I don't know if you've read it, but I did in an interview, I had met these kind of crazy group of artists from Chicago at one of the cons, and I was right in the middle, I was getting ready to do that sequence. And I had the idea that the blue fire and the screech of the dragon would be, in essence, the vocalization for the entire dead army. So the expression of the lost souls, the tortured souls. So that was my just how was I going to how was I going to tie all this stuff together? And so I had these friends who I had met. We were going to get some vocal artists to come in, and we had run out of time. And I knew these guys were in one of them's in a punk band, and they're artists, and they do all this stuff. And I knew they had the gear, and they were from a group that filmed themselves watching Game of Thrones and were emoting all the time. So I knew that they would emote. The Burlington Bar gang. And so I said to them, because I had just met them at the con, and I just called one of them up and said, could you guys just scream your tortured soul screams? And I said, because I wanted, and I couldn't tell them what it was for. I said, so they gave me this huge palette. And so, because the idea, you see that one shot where all the dead army is standing there and they're just silent, and there's the Night King blowing the wall. And I thought of it as he was their conduit. He was on their behalf, screaming and yelling at the wall and bringing it down. That was my kind of thought process. So that stuff is in it. Their screams are in it. And along with that, I wanted something else to add, something of interest, something weighty, something mythological, and something that would differentiate blue fire from normal fire, just in case two dragons might meet. Not that I knew that, and maybe they don't, but just in case, I needed to be ready. So I started thinking about what other elements I could add in the iciness, and I started researching, and this is kind of the crazy that I do, because I'm really fascinated with anomalies, sonic anomalies of the earth and stuff, and one of them is singing quartz. Have you ever heard of this?
Singing quartz?
Singing quartz.
I think I have.
So these special quartz, and they come from and they're coming in these staffs. And then what makes them unique, they come from a certain place in South America. And what makes them unique is that when you rub them together, or you rub them by themselves, they have a ring off. And the tone of the ring is said to be tuned to the common sound of the earth, which is So that is the tonality that these crystals give off. So I recorded the crystals and included that in the fire. So they have this, and it's really funny because that crystal sound, even on YouTube, on your laptop speakers, when you're watching that you can hear it fluttering, and I love.
We watched it, and we're because we saw an interview where you said it was fans screaming and mixtures. So we're we have to rewatch this and hear it, and you can hear all of it. So
there's something really interesting, but it adds. So in that, it's like world building in a way. It's myth building in a sense. It's like choosing sounds that, again, could bring you through threshold of believability, but have an internal logic and help you make you believe that these could possibly be real. And it's just not a sound slapped on arbitrarily. It's really thoughtful. And I think the great thing about Thrones is that every single thing in Thrones is like that. In every department, people think the way I do. They think of these things. So what you end up with is this meaty feast. And you don't even know all the things you're eating, but you know it's really good and someone spent a good time, and you feel full and satisfied after, because all the thought and special stuff, the costumes, and this season, dear God, and the sets, everything.
Now, there's a quote that I saw in a video. It said that you travel to the edges of the earth to find,
the edges of
everything to find the weird stuff.
And bring it back.
What has been the weirdest sound that you've come across that you were
Well, some of these things I just talked about, and I come up, I present the obvious, but I always give them some weird, crazy stuff, and I think they don't always use it, but they appreciate that if you really want to go over the top, look, check this out, but I think some of the stuff surrounding this, some of the craziest. I had one of the things they didn't use, which I was sad, but I really liked it, is I had a modified jackhammer on the wall when Viserion was blowing the blue fire, and it was like bang, 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 and it was really weird and kind of cool.
Yeah.
And they said, yeah, it's super cool, but not this show.
We like it, but not for this.
No, but it's okay because it's something else. If you're looking for something else, and it's like I can say, look, I've thought about this. Here's this smorgasbord of things now, because essentially they will take all my stuff, all the sound effects, the sound effects cutters, Foley, and all the music, and all the dialogue, and all of that has to be shaped and molded in this way. So they need all these different threads, because I can think of a certain shape that the show might take, but I'm not working with all the music and everything that's going on. That's the job on the stage. So my job is I always say that, to run crazily and wildly to the ends of the earth, to find the oddest treasures and bring them back for them. And they let me do that. And they let everybody do that. And that's why Thrones is Thrones, because we are given creative space to dream big and try things and fail, but try another thing because that led to this or whatever. And that's why it's so gorgeous. That's why, because we're given that room. We're not micromanaged by someone's relatively narrow scope, because there's no way. Dan and David are brilliant. But their brains can still only be so big, and they're pretty big. I mean, they may have gotten larger, allotments than the rest of us, but still, I think. But it also takes pressure off them. They don't have to have all the ideas.
And it's always good to have different perspectives and different ways of thinking and looking at stuff.
And if all my thing is sound, that's all I'm doing. And I'm thinking of weird sounds and cool stuff, because part of my job is within a scene. It's like, I want you to look at this. I'm going to assign something interesting, so you look there. Picking all those things. So I scour the frames, all sonic opportunities that I can possibly think of. And then they pick and choose what they will and won't play to tell the story the best that they want. Because my job is not, here's all the great sounds I make. My job is to help them find their voice and help the show find their voice and help them mold it. And I could make some of the coolest sounds ever, but if it doesn't serve that to its greatest end, then it doesn't, So the jackhammer thing was cool, but, was it distracting from something else? Probably it was getting in the way of the music, because the music probably had percussion in there or something. I don't know what the reason. Or maybe they didn't like it, or maybe they felt it didn't need it. It was good with... it doesn't matter. It's their thing, and it's whatever they feel tells the story the best. My job is to give them a lot of really interesting options so they can do that. And dragons.
And dragons. We'll do this last one, and they're probably going to pick us out soon. So you described Dany and Drogon to have this close personal relationship, that even they have their own sound. Will we see kind of almost a similar relationship with the Night King Viserion? Or do we see that?
What's that?
Well, in essence, you have. I mean, right? If he is basically almost becoming the voice for that army in some ways, but it's not. I've always said. I mean, my own story with Dany and Drogon is that Drogon is the reincarnation of Khal Drogo, her insanely hot husband from season 1. Right? That's my dream that I've put in, and I enjoy that. But it's there in the piece. I mean, there is something almost sexual, not quite, but I play with that. You'll see Dany, like in season 7, a couple of times she gets up or descends off Drogon, and you'll hear him turn to her, and there's a trill. It's his little hot "Hey Mama" whistle, or whatever. You know what I mean? It's their little language. It's his beautiful beautiful softness with her. You know, I had a dog named Angel, who was kind of my dragon, and she is a Belgian Malinois who was fierce and could bite anyone's head off. She would. But she would come up to me, and in her sweetest moments, there was a tiny cry almost. This little nasal whistle, slight crying, and it would melt me so hard because she was this beast. And I use that sound. And when Drogon has been off burning babies and sheep, it comes back in 5, at the beginning of 5, off the roof, it comes down to her. I love that scene. And Angel's nasal whistle, that's the first time you hear it. It's so intimate, so beautiful, and this beast who can literally, you know, one chomp and she's gone, is so tender to her. That is so, I love that connection. It's so not what you would ever expect. And it's weirdly almost believable the way between visual effects, and I work very hard to try to also like bring you there so you believe that relationship. It's a cool one. It's been a fun story for me to play with in my mind, but I'm sorry it's there.
Well, it actually adds more to the scene.
There's something interesting about it. It's
especially when you know when it has a personal.
Well, and then the other two, I always call Beavis and Butthead, right? Because they're like goofy bros, you know, or like. So it's kind of fun. I mean, in essence, with the dragons, you know, I've been asked to essentially shape performances of characters in the piece. So to have ideas of what their personalities are is really important. And again, it's like growing up with pets in your house. I mean, they all have their own personalities, especially when they're all together. That's the most fascinating thing. They have multiple animals together and how they interact with one another. I love it. I love watching it. Fascinated by it. I've been happy because I'm a massive dog lover to be able to incorporate that in the work. It's been really fun.
Yeah, I have a dog too. I'm like the same way.
Oh yeah, no, and it's great.
And there is a certain tone to like who. I mean, I always consider my dog family, so I'm like, I'm the mom. Like, there's like a tone to like the mother.
It's different.
Different than like a stranger or family.
It's different, and so because of that, because of same experience, right? I've tried to work that into the vocalizations, so you feel that. And I think that's the cool thing. I think that's why the dragons are so beloved, because they are like everybody's puppies that are in the house. You know, it's like there they are, and oh, look at them, and they're being bad again, or they're in saving the day, or whatever. But I think that's why they're so beloved, because we've watched them grow up, and when we got them as puppies, and here they are. You know?
Now that Viserion has a totally different storyline now, has his character changed from like your idea of the Beavis and Butthead, you know, Regal and Viserion? Is he kind of a different character now?
He's kind of iced up, isn't he? I mean, he's it's interesting. I mean, obviously, I've had 6, 7 seasons, well, less than that, but because I've been on since 3, but whatever, 5 seasons to develop these personalities. Where with Viserion, it's quick at the end, and now we just have this last season. So sort of, you know, so the opportunity for that isn't as big, but there's some cool stuff. You'll see. If he shows up again or whatever.
We don't know.
No, it's been very, very unique. Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. I'm gonna miss it so bad. You know, as we all are. It's gonna be a collective cry party.
I think it's like it's gonna be forever around. I think generation after generations. It's just that kind of show that can carry on.
Well, they are now already.
I hope they don't remake it.
You know, I'm very proud of the fact that it is and this season's gonna. It's something else.
So we've heard it's gonna be
a little bit. Some stuff happens.
Let me tell you, stuff happens. That's all.
It's not like I'm telling everybody to have their therapist on speed dial.
Oh no! I guess we can end it here. Thank you so much.